The story begins with the stepmother, the villain, drinking her son out of the house. A little boy named Here, with very beautiful eyes, apologized and said he didn't mean to do it at all. But it was too late at that point, and Little said that one apology wasn't enough at all, and that if he'd broken it to Azu, he couldn't be a good kid. Then she said, "You're him." Shut up and stopped apologizing, turned around and started walking back to the house, and he clung to her dress and apologized again. She then turned around, and threw him off her dress, and told him she wasn't going to say it twice, and again told him to get out of the house. Then he was all alone, being outside the gates in front of a large palace. After that, the girl closes the book and thinks to herself that she can't read this anymore at all. No matter how much she tried, she can't get used to this stupid story. Who in the villain Layla Marshmallow? She was originally born just a nice lolly. She was loved by everyone for her gentle nature, and she was to become the village lord's concubine because of her beauty. However, a few days before the wedding, a man from another world got into her body and also took possession of Layla's body, and the girl immediately fled the village. Also, a former sweetheart, Layla, seduced Earl Marshmallow, the young Earl's son, and a wealthy divorced man. She married and lived life to the fullest. However, as it turned out, after the wedding itself, the Earl of Marshmallow fell ill and died immediately. Layla then inherited the mansion and began bullying his son, the Earl, and eventually kicked him out of the house, which she didn't even have the right to do. The girl thought how poor this guy was, and that he was not at all to blame. If she had been Layla, she would have behaved very differently, she thought to herself. Also complimented that this woman really deserved to die. And at that moment, the stove brought some sounds, and she remembered that she had indeed even made bread. So she went over and checked the oven, and realized that the bread was indeed cooked. All that was left was to spread chocolate on it, and it was ready. At that moment, there was a knock at her door. Her father. And that's when she didn't realize how he'd found her. As it turned out, she was a victim of domestic violence, as her father was also involved in a very messy affair. And to avoid exactly his drunken visits, she moved several times. But how he found her again, she could not understand. And after that, she realized that he came again and decided that she would not pay attention to him. She started to open the stove to take out the bread, and at that moment a very terrible thing happened. There was a big explosion. The furnace exploded. Then the girl thought, is this really the plot of some novel, and what really happened? For more burns covered her entire body, and her lungs were filled with the pungent smell of black smog, and in her last moments of life, she realized that she had lived it very horribly. A girl wakes up and sees a huge chandelier that shines directly into her eyes. Then she does not realize where she woke up and what is going on. Just then a maid comes into her room and says to her, "Mrs. Marshmallow," and explains to her that there has been a little commotion. The girl was also immediately surprised after the maid called Mrs. S. Marshmallow and thought there was no such thing. She walked over to the mirror, looked at herself, and the gorgeous blonde hair and eyes the color of beautiful appearance, like a gorgeous lily of the valley. Countess Layla Marshmallow, and she realized what had entered her body. After which she remembered how in real life she had talked about, poor boy, and had she been Layla, and she would have behaved very differently. But she didn't think it would happen and she would really become Layla. Then the maid came up to her and asked if she was well, and Madame Layla, in order not to show anything suspicious, decided to pull herself together and asked what was the matter. Then the maid said that Hiru-san had become unwell, after which she asked, what should she do? Again doing the usual thing. And so, as she got into the body, she didn't know what she was doing. She usually asked the maid. Under the pretext that I don't remember, it used to be what? And the maid answered that she used to close the room until he was quite cured, and said she would go to him. The maid was very surprised, whereupon Madame told the maid to take her to the guy. The maid apologized and they started moving. She then led him to the room and told him he was behind this door. The madam knocked and entered the room. After that, the guy was asleep, but as soon as the madam entered the room, he woke up and turned around and started looking towards the door and saw his mom there. I pitched to him that I heard the guy wasn't feeling well and decided to ask him what was hurting him, but he immediately admitted that he wasn't hurting anything and apologized for upsetting her. Then she really saw how much pain the Lady Marshmallow Lady had caused this child before. When Hare grows up because he grew up in hell, he becomes emperor and executes Countess Marshmallow. And then Madame decided that she couldn't fight back her father, and so now he will help us Hiru. She asked the maid why he was so thin, and the maid replied that the young master had not eaten at all for a couple of days. Then she ordered to immediately bring some food for him to eat, and then she wondered, can she get closer, and came closer. She realized that he's really not feeling well. He's burning up all over, and really, it's like he's not feeling well. Then he twitched his hands and said he was sorry and didn't need anything, because he didn't want to interfere. But Lady said she came because she heard he was sick and that he didn't need to apologize. But the guy said he was faking it. So he made his mom worry. He's not really sick, and he apologized again. After which she once again realized since he had been through more, and told him that she forbade him to apologize, and also told him to stop worrying because he was supposedly sick. Afterward, she looked at how his room was dirty and not cleaned everywhere. Cobwebs and a big layer of dust. She realized that this was a very dirty room and she could catch something from it, so it needed to be cleaned immediately. She then saw a bowl of water on the table and she asked him if he drank the water, to which the guy said he thought he could. And then the maid brought soup for the young master, and decided to take the soup away and said she would feed him herself. But the maid objected and said she would feed him herself, and then the lady remembered that in the original novel the maid also abused the child, whereas Mrs. Marshmallow simply ignored the boy. The maid abused the child. Then the lady threw away the soup the maid had brought, for it was of mud. I don't know what it was, and ordered something edible to be brought. Then she brought new soup and ordered the maid to bring a drink, followed by a wet towel and also medicine. But the maid said they had no medicine for children, and Madame ordered me to go and buy them. In that case, unless of course she doubted her instructions. When the maid went to sort things out, looking for medicine, a wet towel and a drink, Madame was feeding the lad. She realized that the guy had already started to grow thorns, and absolutely everyone in the mansion had become an enemy to him. As he gets older, his thorns will only get sharper, but there is only one person capable of helping him, and that is his godfather, Duke Lazius Hubert. And she realized that he needed to be there for the guy, and also her hug left him with only cold memories, and she hopes he can get over it. Then the maid brought the medicine, and Madame said she had run out of water. So we must bring more water, for there must be something to fill the medicine with. After which she thought that the maid never realized what was going on, and that was a very good thing. After that, she also asked that the servant girl bring a wet towel and let it be slightly cool. She also asked why she hadn't cleaned up the broken plate yet. Also, she told her that if she continued like this, she could get out from behind the mansion. And the maid was very surprised and asked for forgiveness, and that she should take her time, for she was the most devoted maid. And then the lady gave her her favorite earrings, and the maid thought she wanted to surprise her, was very pleased. But then, Madame told her to choose either she would be kicked out for stealing Madame or she would leave on her own. So she was fired. Then Madame approached the boy and apologized for scaring him. He must have heard the noise and got scared. After that, she came to him, decided that they had to do something, as this room was very dirty, and said that they would go to his room. She took him in her arms, and they went. As they walked, she thought to herself that she would protect him to make him happy. Afterwards, she locked him in her room and wished him sweet dreams for the night. The boy didn't say thank you. Then Jane, the head maid of the Marshmallow Mansion, passed by. Approaching Madame, she asked, "What's wrong?" That's when Layla explained that her maid had just left the mansion. Therefore, she needed to tell everyone that she had robbed Madame. If anything, the maid said, it would definitely be done right away. And then Layla thought that she couldn't just put down whoever was bullying her child. And she also ordered that the best room be allotted to the lad, and said aloud that from now on she was not going to leave in her pants and watch her and her son being abused, and that she would denounce and then absolutely all the servants. The maid said she would do everything so Layla wouldn't worry about it. Layla also asked her to prepare carreta, and said that they were going to Duke Lazius's house in Hubert's mansion. The next day before leaving for the mansion, Me Complicated asked what kind of stuff Layla had with her. Then she said it was, shall we say, monster bait, and as she set off, the maid wondered why it had happened so suddenly and quite uninvited. Duke Lazius was a cold-blooded devil of a man who hates women. They all surrounded the Duke. He's not well known because he doesn't appear in social circles. He's quite handsome, and that's not an exaggeration. Also, Layla had already prepared herself for a cold reception, for he wasn't expecting her. But she must see the one who would become Hira's godfather for once. When they arrived, Layla stepped out of the carriage and saw the huge mansion and was surprised. Then a butler came up behind them, apologized, and asked if they had an appointment with the Duke, whereupon she said that yes, appointments were made, and asked him to tell him that Layla had arrived. Afterward, the butler told Layla to wait 1 minute. Then she thought he was just like an angel, so he wouldn't lie. After a few minutes had passed, bad weather started outside and it began to rain. Then he came out with an umbrella and told her to come inside with him. Then he told the Duke that he had brought the lady in, and she was very much struck with the fact that he led her at once into a private office. As they walked in, she thought she was running into a lion's cage, but soon enough she changed her mind when she saw him. She realized how handsome he was and not at all a lion as she had assumed. He's more like an affectionate and harmless cat. Now she began to understand why the princess was always chasing after him, for he shines like the sun. And afterward the Duke told her she was soaking wet and suggested that he take off his jacket. He then said that he had not promised anything, but she had come so calmly, as if they already knew each other. After that, he said that she knew him well, and asked if they really knew each other. She apologized and said they would never have seen each other otherwise, and then she asked why he had let her in, since he knew she had lied. Afterwards, he remarked that many people were interested in him, but she was the first one who acted like that, and he was very curious. Then he said she had a very pretty face, and asked if she had come in person to see for herself, after which he explained that he didn't like it when a pretty girl turned ugly, and it would be great if he could get a proper response. So further, Ida realized he was smiling sweetly, but his eyes gave him away as Duke Hubert. She said she had a proposition for him and offered to sit down, then he agreed. She remembered that in the original the Duke had no interest in women. He hated anyone who followed him around, so if she couldn't convince him, it was unnecessary trouble. She was very glad that she was familiar with the plot, and then the Duke asked her what she wanted to talk about. When they sat down to table, Madame asked if it was true that he had a spy in the mansion, for she knew that the present elk was suffering for the loss of the precious mine. She heard that the precious mine had been given to the Heirloom family, and for a spy, the Hupper family had suffered a lot of losses. She said this. Then the Duke said he wasn't at all sure. She just guessed everything down to the smallest detail. It seems this rat is still selling information. He thought of his spy. Then she said it didn't matter now because she could catch that rat, and she would also return the mine that had been given to him. And then he wondered about that, wondering how she could do that, for which she gave him many sheets on which were written her plans for the future, and told him to read it and draw his own conclusions, after which she realized that, judging from the plot, she could deduce from the spy or the disc he was communicating with, and all the information passed on to exploit the weaknesses of the Heirloom family and retrieve the mine, and that, in fact, it wasn't that hard. Afterwards, she realized that it was all due to the fact that she had reread the same story many times, because that was the only happiness for her when she was alive in real life. Also, at that time she was thinking how to make Layla's son happier. Duke didn't understand where she got all this information from, or if it was reliable. Layla then said that she could guarantee that she could be trusted, and pointed out that Duke still loses nothing in doing so. He didn't understand why she wanted to help him. She must have wanted something in return. And then she said she wanted him to sign a contract with her, and she meant a prenuptial agreement. She said 1 year would be enough. She wanted it to turn out that supposedly her boyfriend was thrown out on the street by his stepmother and found by Duke Lasius. But still, she can't live with him forever, forgetting that she's trapped in the body of a man who abused him constantly, and her presence only makes him worse. So she wanted to arrange for them to meet. She also said that he would understand everything when he read it, but to get the mine back, he would need the help of the Marshmallow family, and she pointed out that it was much easier to get a pass after marriage than to buy one. And they can also divorce right after it's settled. Within a year she's gone, and he's required to just act like they're spouses and be a good husband. She'd made the point that he wasn't interested in women anyway, so there was no way he'd fall in love. The same goes for her. Then he didn't believe her, and asked her if she didn't have feelings for him. She said that she did, and that if he was interested in another woman, he was free to date her, and then remarked that she was only interested in their agreement. The Duke thought it was a very intriguing proposal, and did not understand why she would do it. What was the contract for? Was it only for a marriage of a year? Was she really interested in the fact of marital relations with him? In fact, she wanted Duke Lasius to adopt a son, but she couldn't say so right away as it would be very suspicious. Then she decided that she would tell him everything a little later. and I think she realized that he still didn't trust her. She then said that she would drag the spies and prove that she could be trusted, after which they would discuss the details. Then the Duke supposedly realized what this was really about and also offered to have a cup of tea, which smells just delightful, since it turns out they are now partners. To which the madam refused, thanking him, and said she could not as she had a child waiting for her at home, whereupon she said she had to go. He really liked this girl, as she wasn't afraid to be around him at all, and he was very curious as to how this marriage would end. He decided that life would tell. Upon arrival, the maid greeted her and told her that they had changed the room for her son, and then remarked that she had chosen the sunniest room. After she saw that he was asleep, she asked how long he had been asleep, and the maid replied that immediately after taking the medicine he fell asleep, and they thought that it seemed that the medicine had worked well. Madame relieved herself as she was worried that things could only get worse. Then the maid also thought to herself why Madame had changed so much suddenly, dismissed the maid, and whether she was up to something. She then asked the maid if she could take a closer look at the boy, to which the maid replied that it was only natural since she was his mother. So she took a towel, wet it a little, and went over to him and put it on his forehead, and thought to herself that she couldn't believe that such a sweet child would become a tyrant, and she didn't even want to see it. She was also constantly in thought as to what more she could do for him, and asked the maid if there was an oven. Coming into the kitchen where the oven is, the maid followed her and didn't understand if the lady was going to cook. After which Madame told the servant girl not to worry, and she just wanted to make a yummy treat for the guy. When she made the dough and immediately popped it into the oven, there was some unintelligible sound, like something falling. And then the maid said she was going to go and check it out and see what was really going on. As it turned out, it was Countess Fasha who had come, and then the maid said she should have scheduled a meeting, but she yelled at her and told her to get out of her way, as she didn't need to make an appointment to visit her own son's house. In the original, Countess Fasha Marshmallow was Layla's mother-in-law, a woman not the least bit disturbed by the death of her own son, suddenly showing up at his house claiming wealth. When they sat down at the table, she said the widow should sit quietly in her black dress and asked what Layla's shell was. Also, she was sure Layla was proud to be rid of her son. The story said that the Earl of Marshmallow died of a venereal disease, but his wife was a villain who did not hesitate to get rid of her husband. Afterward, Layla asked, what did she come here for? She doubted very much that it was only to say that. Whereupon her mother said that she had come for the inheritance, and did Layla not think that even after her son's death, she would still be bathing in luxury? Then Layla said she didn't know if she could stay in the mansion, but the land belongs to her and her son. Then the mother was astonished and said that everything here belonged to the family, and how dare she squeeze the Earl's possession, to which Layla said that she was trying to squeeze his possession. They're just doing Earl Marshmallow's bidding. She also said that it couldn't be, and after all, she couldn't find the will anywhere for obvious reason, as she cares about the mansion much more than her son. In the original, Layla took her husband's meeting and hid it well. Amusingly, thanks to Layla's misdeeds, her son Her will now be able to inherit the estate. And the will is kept in the Ahibalt Bank, and she just won't be able to do it, she told her mother. When she realized that there was simply no way to make a will and she had no way out, she simply walked away, realizing there was nothing she could do. Then it went too well for Layla, because she was already familiar with the plot and knew what was going to happen ahead of time. It was very boring for her, but on the other hand, it was even more relaxing that way. Her son here also helped her to cope with the hardships. She dreams that he will be happy. As they sat at the table, she realized that he was very cute, and at that moment he coughed. She helped him and offered him a drink of milk. After he coughed, he asked in Russia, and thought that he must have made her lose her appetite. He thought that because she hadn't even touched her food, all because he was sitting across from her. After which she was very surprised that he thought she wasn't eating soup just because of him, and after which she realized that she hadn't thought things through very well, and actually can never make him happy since she is in Layla's body. She decided she had to show him sincerity. Only then might there be a chance. Then she said it was okay, and he didn't need to apologize at all. Then she thought that when she apologized to him, it would make him feel better, and he would believe that she was really ready to take care of him. She knelt before him and apologized. She said that all this time she had been indifferent to him and had let the maids dress over him, and for all that, she wanted to apologize. After which she said that she wouldn't hurt them anymore, that he wouldn't even worry about it anymore, and she said that it probably didn't sound very convincing. but that he should try to trust, and at that time she didn't think at all that her son would open up after one apology. She decided that she needed to give him a happy life full of love and affection, and she would do absolutely anything to make him happy, she told him, and swore. Then she gave him a box that held a gift. He didn't realize at once what it was, but when she pulled it out, he saw it was an apron and said it would look really good on her, and my son said he loved it and it looked really great. When he was making it, she said it looked really cute. He also liked it very much. The guy was very surprised, as he was very gracious in passing, and he really hoped it would always be like this, as he enjoyed it so much. Then the lady came to Duke Asius again and said it went pretty quickly, and that when she caught his spy, he immediately disappeared. And then she noticed that the spy was very clever, or just had good instincts, but she picked up his trail, and then gave him a piece of paper on which she wrote everything down and handed it over to the Duke on these sheets, and said that she was thinking that he might run away soon. Igor so then asked what she was going to do. Well, what she said was that he had to be caught. After that, he said that it was interesting for him, and suggested that they could do it together. After that, she asked that if he was not busy, then of course they could do it together. So they went downstairs, and she figured the spy didn't come here to play a game. And the Duke said that apparently he had a meeting with someone, and they decided that they should go to the VIP section on the second floor. Then, approaching a favor who was apparently a guard, the Duke said he had a little business on the second floor, and they needed to go there. But the servant also asked who it was next to him, and whereupon the Duke told him it was his wife, and they went where they wanted to go with no trouble. Then Madame said it was very good that they had come together. She would never have been allowed there alone. Back then, she thought she could do everything according to plan. But in the original, you had a lot of problems. Even spies were reselling information about the duchy to third parties, and the weakened duchy completely fell into disrepair. And the moment it was left without an heir, here appeared, abandoned by Madame Marshmallow. That's how Here became the heir to the duchy. If she married Lasius, Her would immediately become an adopted son. So she wasn't afraid if the spy escaped, and as she was about to reach to open the doors, the Duke took her hand and told her to take her time. At that moment, the very same spy flies out of the door and tries to escape once. But I told you it was useless to run. And realizing he's been caught, he takes Madame supposedly as a hostage, and says that if the Duke makes one more move, his girl is finished. Thought to himself that even as it was discovered, Lasius would do absolutely anything to get rid of him. So he thinks that since it's the girl who's quiet, she's probably an important person, is to him. Then he ordered that the Duke turn his back to them and close his eyes. He thought to himself that apparently the spy was going to kill him, and he didn't want to lose his life for her, some stranger. What's he got to do? Risk this girl? I realized he's not the one who doesn't want to. Then the girl lashed out, and as this spy was running at the Duke, she realized that she was constantly bullied by her father in her past life. So she is not afraid. No more. No more threats. And she just has to catch the spy and make her son happy. Then she knocked him down so he wouldn't kill the Duke, at which point they fell him to the ground and the Duke would deal with the rest. When she interrupted him, he stabbed her a little. Then he told him that just a few minutes ago he was still confident, and now he was nothing, and asked him if he enjoyed selling the information. Then he asked the Duke for mercy, and the Duke said that he had already made a mistake, so let him not even think of begging for mercy, and that if he'd gone for it, he should have been prepared for that outcome. He also decided he needed to know who was covering it up for your Fiona, and he asked him the question you had to answer if you wanted to live. But the spy realized that there was no way he could tell who was behind it, because if I didn't find out he'd told me, he'd be killed. So he decided to finish it himself. Then the Duke realized that he wasn't going to kill him until he would get an answer. But who would have thought he would finish the job himself? After that, he realized that first he needed to go quickly now and heal Layla's wounds. Fortunately, it was shallow, and the spy was clearly surprised by the sudden appearance. He told her, after which he asked her why she had done it. Then she didn't know what to say to him, as she couldn't say it was all for her son. Then she said that she liked his face, but she did not want to bathe on it. Then the Duke thanked her and asked her not to do it again. But she pointed out that because of her they had caught a spy. That was the victory, wasn't it? To which he replied that it might seem strange, but he didn't want to see her suffer at all, since the whole point was that she was going to be his wife. She was very amazed and did not expect such an outcome because the moose in the book was always described as a cold-blooded man, but in life he was quite different. After which he asked again if she was all right, as she had hurt herself because of him. But she said he had helped her bandage her wound, so also went. It was all just nothing. When she was already leaving, he thought about the fact that he felt very strange, as girls often told him that he was beautiful, but he felt nothing. And now he was very worried about her words. He didn't understand why this was happening. He realized that just one thought, and that to the woman herself, made him feel very strange, when they had not seen each other for a long time. After a while, Madame Layla received a telegram and wondered who could have sent it. Opening it, she read it, and it said the following: "When are you coming? I miss you very much. I'm waiting for your return. You haven't forgotten about me, have you?" It was a letter from Lysias. She was very surprised to hear Lysias say that, for it was very strange behavior for him. She thought he was like a puppy missing its master, but since she was just about to visit him, everything worked out, even better than she wanted. She then wrote him a telegram and asked him in reply if she could come tonight, to which he immediately gave her the answer that he did not mind in the least, and let her come any time she pleased. When she received the answer that the Duke was expecting her and she could come any day she pleased, she immediately told of her maid Jane to prepare the carriage, and told her that she was going to head for Duke Hubert's mansion, to which the maid replied that she didn't think it was necessary to cook anything, whereupon she asked to look outside, and when she looked outside, there she saw a very beautiful flowered carriage and thought it couldn't be. The maid replied that this carriage was definitely not there. The Duke had sent it, and then Layla thought, "Is he a romantic?" Whereupon she immediately said that she would go to pack, and for the coachman to prepare to depart, to which the maid said that would be done. After arriving, the Duke met Layla, and he was very pleased when she arrived. He immediately asked her how her arm was, if it still hurt, to which Layla replied that it was much better, and not to worry him. The Duke then said he was very glad to hear that she was okay, and also said that she couldn't even imagine how freaked out he was that his wife hadn't sent him a word. But with a chuckle, Layla said he was lying. The Duke didn't like it, and then he asked her if it was absolutely true, and asked her for the answer as to why she thought so. She decided not to give an answer to that, and with that, she handed him the contract and told him to read it and ask questions if he was interested in anything about it. To which he was a little disappointed and said he didn't want to discuss work, at which point Layla asked what they should talk about then, if not work. And then he asked her what she had been doing all this time while she was at her house. She began to think to herself, and whether he was really interested in knowing this, and looking at his face, it spoke for him that she had to answer. And then she said that she baked cookies and also made macaroni. Then the Duke was a little surprised, for one thing, that she was cooking by herself, and also said to her, "Does she really like sweets?" To which she also replied that of course she liked sweets, but she didn't eat them herself as they were for someone else. Then Duke thought, "Is there someone else for me?" and asked with a very hurt expression on his face, "For whom else?" And she didn't understand what this strange reaction was. He thought they were supposed to be for him. He then immediately asked her who she had given them to, and explained to her that he had received nothing. She said with a surprised face that since he liked sweets, next time she would be sure to send them to him too. And the Duke became jealous and asked, who did she give them to this time then? When she replied that she had given them to Hiru, his fist clenched here. He started to get nervous, but then he heard the answer that it was her son, and he was very surprised. It was then that she swept up that it would not be long before he would be his son as well. It was also then that the Duke remembered that exactly. She had, after all, mentioned a son when they first met, and she couldn't believe her eyes that. Is this really the same Duke from the novel, who was very closed-minded and did not like women? She thought to herself that he was very different. And then she suggested that he continue the conversation about the contract. She said that it would be and is valid for 1 year, and there is only one condition in it, that the Duke adopts Kier, and he must see him as an heir and his own son. Thanks to his upbringing, Heer will get the ring just like in the original. Then Lysias will accept Heer as his own son. After she finished speaking, she told him that he could add his own terms. After which he said the only thing he said. 14. It asked that they agree among themselves that they would not date other people, and would behave like a real couple. She thought to herself that she didn't care about other men at all because she didn't care about them at all, and she answered him okay. Why didn't you decide to put your signature in? Showed each other where to sign. And then she saw that it was a marriage certificate, and didn't understand why they would necessarily report it to the state, since they would have to divorce in a year. To the cast, he replied that if he was going to do it, he should do it by the book, for he wasn't going to get married, but to try it for a year. Then they kept signing, and when they had almost signed everything, there was only one signature left. A strange girl burst into his room and started screaming, having him. Afterwards, she asked him, "Is it true that he is getting married?" And then Layla was very much agitated, for she thought it was his mother, and what was to be done if she opposed it? Would the betrothal also come to an end? When she entered, she went straight to Layla and asked, "Is this really the woman her son is going to marry?" To which Layla replied that absolutely right, but she hadn't signed the contract yet. "And you have?" She asked that they give her a heads up. She immediately said enough of this chatter and said the word "come in" loudly. Afterward, several people immediately came into the room with gifts, and she immediately approached Layla, and she said, "Is it possible to greet your daughter-in-law empty-handed?" After which she immediately asked what kind of shoes, as well as what kind of dresses she liked. After which she said she hoped they also had the same taste in jewelry, and showed her favorite necklace, which looked gorgeous on her. Layla was very surprised. I didn't understand what was going on. Asked what it was, to which his mother replied that it was her thanks. And she picked up on the fact that she was getting frustrated. Every time he kicked the women out saying he didn't want to get married, but she thought they were destined to find their man. Layla then thanked the Duke's mother and said that she had already received many gifts from Duke Jupiter, so she shouldn't. The mother then asked if it was too rude to call her husband by his title, and requested that she call him by his first name, to which the Duke immediately smirked and said he didn't mind. She was immediately alarmed, not knowing what to do, and thought of how nothing in this world was made easy, and she really didn't want him to ask afterwards, and them a fair favor. Just then her mom came up to her and told her that she felt dizzy, asked her what she was thinking about, and not to worry as it was just a gift for her adorableness. Already swept up in the fact that this is the second time she's been married, and she's not very good at all. To which the mother said that her future didn't matter because if her son loved her, she would also love her, and remarked that absolutely any mother would do that. How did she demand that if she was concerned about the origin of this mouthpiece, tell her, as her family does not tolerate people who disrespect the family? Then Layla thought and didn't understand why everything was so simple here, since in her previous life she had never even dreamed of marriage. She only lived without a mother, and suffered because of her father. Then her mother didn't know which dress to choose for certain jewelry, as they looked too good, so she decided either would do. The Duke then put his arm around Layla and asked her if she was having a hard time taking it all in, to which she replied that it was fine and she was just not used to it, so she was a little uncomfortable. She immediately told him that if she had a mom like his, she would get unconditional love right away, so didn't quite get that and asked why that was so. But she said she was just a little jealous since she had no family. That's why she envies such love, because no one could even give it to her. The Duke tried to comfort her and told her that there was no need to be upset anymore and that after the wedding they would be one family to each other. Layla also imagined in her head that after exactly 1 year had passed since the beginning of their feud, when their contract was up, this Duke might offer her an extension at this rate, only this time for 100 years. She manages to arrive at the situation in her head as they look at each other in the face, and he tells her that he really hates to break up with her after a year of their marriage, and he wants to extend it absolutely seriously. She then came back to reality and decided to ask the Duke if there was time, to which he said he would only stay for her, after which he asked what was the matter. She then took a piece of paper out of her pocket, which turned out to be an invitation, and when the Duke asked what it was, she told him it was an invitation to an event, and asked him in return if he had received it, to which he said he had. And she explained to him that she had to attend the event, and suggested that he keep her company. But since he remained silent, she thought that he hadn't gotten the invitation after all, and that's why he was so upset. Because he didn't give any explicit answer, she also thought he'd thrown it out, and that's why he wasn't even going to go there. But she'd picked up on the fact that he'd go with or without an invitation, but they'd be there together. And then she didn't understand why he squeezed his hand so hard, and afterward asked if she could look at what he squeezed. Then the Duke let her look at the gun, and she really liked it. She said it was a very amazing piece of work. The Duke thought she wanted to shoot it, so he offered it to her. When she picked up the gun and aimed to fire, he saw the grip she was using and was very surprised. He told her that it was a very good grip, and the bullet would have gone right through the window and into the target, and then asked her where she had learned to shoot. She said that even as a child, as she practiced to shoot her father one day. She didn't think it would ever come in handy, but she never got around to killing him. He then explained to her how to make the shot, and told her to shoot with a ring attached to the barrel of the gun. After which he explained that the ring was a substance emanating from the caster's body, known for its powerful destructive power. It is said to have infinite potential, and when the ring pierces the target, it returns. That makes it more convenient than bullets. Not everyone can use it. That makes it extremely rare. In the original 8 years later, Here created 3 rings. But who this man really was, she couldn't take her eyes off him. Then she got very teary-eyed, and the Duke asked her if she liked the ring better than his face too. Then she said it was more like a puppy, and she stroked his head, and the Duke said he didn't like it very much when she treated him like a puppy. When she arrived home, she met a maid who asked what it was in her hand, to which Layla replied that it was a treat for Hira, at which time she said that the gentleman was in his room. Then the maid decided that she would help with her advice, after which she said that he should not be given too many sweets. With obesity comes serious diseases. And Layla said that next time she would not give him anything, so as not to make things worse by accident. When she walked into Hiru's room, she said she had a present for him and told him she bought chocolate pudding and if he wanted to try it. After which I remarked that it was a gift from a famous pastry chef, so it must be delicious, and gave him a taste. He liked this pudding very much, and he also gave it to his mom to try, and then she thought they were very close. Finally, she had waited for this for a very long time. She was really shocked that the guy didn't trust her. But still he was trying to get closer, and she didn't know how to behave in such a situation. Then she tasted it and said it was really good, but she also thought the guy was worried about her turning it down. Afterwards, seeing the joy on Hira's face, she asked if he liked it, to which she got the answer that she liked it a lot. She also decided to ask him to go for a walk. She remembered that there was a very fine swing, as Hira was very much in love with it, and offered to go for a ride on it, to which he gladly agreed. When they were on the swing, Layla came up to him and told him that she had caused him a lot of pain after her father died, apologized for that, and said he would never have to be afraid again, and that swing was her apology to him. To which Hira said he had a present for her too and said he would bring it to her now. But because he jumped up abruptly out of it, he fell to his knees. Layla became very worried and went up to him and asked him if he was okay. He said yes, he was fine, and held back tears. Seeing this, Layla realized that as a child, she also hid her own pain and was afraid of being punished for it. But she really wanted Hira to be happy because she recognizes herself in him. That's exactly what was missing from her father. She told him not to hold it in and cry. It's normal. If he's in pain, then let him not be silent. After which she decided for herself that she would try absolutely anything to get the very love she didn't have. They then got up and decided that they needed to go home immediately, as they needed to check his knee. Then the boy asked Layla to take his hand, and half asked him if he had decided that on his own, to which he said yes. When they got home, when they went into the room, the boy said he had a present for her and didn't know if she would like it or not, to which she said she appreciates absolutely everything he does. And then he pulled out a single flower, and then Layla was very surprised, and realized what he was doing in the room when she entered. He didn't have time to finish it, but he still managed to give her a gift. She really appreciated it. Then he said she gave him crowns, chocolate pudding, and even a swing, and he had a very modest gift compared to her gifts. Then Layla also told me that she was very grateful for such a beautiful gift. And the boy felt good that he had surprised his mom, and she smiled when she saw his present. He thought to himself that he wished he could see his mom smile more often. A little later, when Layla arrived at Duke Perth's house, they immediately got down to the treaty, and Layla said it was just a formal treaty. The Duke did not much like it, for she immediately on meeting first thought of the contract and thought, did she at once about the contract? After which she said it was very important to her. After that he saw her drinking and it also pleased him, as she had never drunk anything lately, not even the most famous teas. But as expected, she does like sweets after all, he told her. He then said he did it especially for her and asked if she liked it, to which she said of course she did. Then she decided to ask him one more time to finally sign the contract she had brought him. After he signed it, he said he'd keep it. Well, Layla thought it would be best if they put it in the Arabald Bank. But the Duke, you have already said that there is no safer place in all the empire than his home. And then Layla asked him if she could ask him a question. And she asked him if he remembered the ring, the very one she had mentioned last time, to which the Duke replied that he did, and then Layla thought to herself that if Heir inherited it earlier than in the original, it would be easier for him. So of course it was Lassius who knew the most about it. She then asked the Duke how many people were using the ring, and he said that she must be very curious since she was asking such questions, and she confirmed it. The Duke replied that absolutely all the descendants of the Hupert family are familiar with the ring, but he was the one who knew how to use it. Layla was very interested in it then, and she asked him if she still had to know how to use it. But the Duke immediately said exactly what it was. But if she could not use the ring, she would lose all kinship. After that, she realized that I had gained power over the entire duchy. And apparently he is very good at it after all, even better than everyone else. And then she decided to ask if he could show her the ring again, and he agreed. After 8 years of hard work, Heir created 3 rings, and by the time he became emperor, he could make 7. But she realized that he hadn't done anything wrong either. That's when things got even more interesting. She asked if it was true that not only members of the Hupert family could operate the rings. She asked how many people there were who could use it, to which I was told that the ring was very sensitive. That is why there are not very many such people. Then she thought about the fact that if she could learn how to control the ring, she could help Hiru. So she decided to ask if she could control it. He replied that of course she could, and offered to teach her, but he said there was one condition. Then he touched his cheek and said you want her to kiss him. She was very frightened by this and did not believe it. She thought he was joking. He immediately calmed down and said he was sorry, but he would be very happy to at least see her more often. And she said fine, and that next time they would see each other when he had time. The Duke immediately replied that he absolutely always had time and was free every day, so they could meet and see each other every day. Layla thought to herself that she knew he was busy all the time, so she interrupted him and asked him how many people there were in the mansion who could operate this very ring, and he said only 3. She asked then to introduce them to each other, to which the Duke replied that he would not, as he liked to be alone with her. Layla then said that if they got married, she would have to meet them anyway, so she really wanted to meet them. Duke said it was impossible to argue with Layla. Then they didn't send a letter to the very 3 people who were very far away from home, that Mr. Hupert was getting married and it was time for the wedding. So they had to go home. They started arguing about how the gentleman could never love a woman, and they don't believe it, because it's some kind of nonsense. They stood to greet them, and he tells them that they are just the 2 of them, and are good at running the ring. When they arrived, they saw the gentleman standing with Layla and were surprised and didn't understand why he was smiling. Then the guy asked the girl if he was imagining it, to which she said it didn't sound much like a dream, at which point the Duke said he wanted them to meet. Then the Duke immediately asked what she thought of the guy, and Layla wasn't happy that he hadn't introduced him. The Duke said that she could call him by any name she wanted, and that it wouldn't be a big deal. Next to him stands Roxana, the leader of kings, he said. After that they separated, and they did not understand how he had fallen in love with the girl. After all, they had worked hand in hand for 10 years, and he still didn't understand why the gentleman needed an escort, since he only made 1 ring. A few days before the Helan family event, Layla decided to learn more about the aristocrat, and decided to read all the letters she could find in his estate. Among all the letters there were some very strange ones, from which she was simply turned to shock. The letter was anonymous, as if from an admirer. She did not understand who could have written it. At that time some lady came into the room and said hello. Then Layla realized who it was and said she was very glad to meet her. It turned out to be Countess Nephili, but she asked to be called simply Edith. She was very famous in aristocratic circles. She told Layla that she didn't want to be rude, but she really wanted to ask a question, and she said she had heard that Layla was getting married. Was it true? Said she certainly expected such a question, and said it was absolutely true. She didn't understand how it was so, since it hadn't been that long since her husband's death. How could she still want to return to aristocratic society? But those were just her thoughts. Layla said that it seemed that Miss Edith was too close to Duke Hupert's family. That's why the news had reached her. When she heard the word Huperto, She said it could not be. She could not believe that she was marrying the Duke. And it seemed to deceive her, for he had rejected the princess, and she thought it was a lie, for she answered him nothing. But afterward she emphasized that Layla had such an amazing charm that even Kursaki was so unable to resist her. Whereupon she said she must go, as she had much to do, and withdrew from Miss Edith. After she saw the guy with the Blake family crest on his chest, she realized it was Oberon Duck Blake, but she wasn't sure since Lady Marshmallowy was familiar with Baron Blake. When they saw each other, they approached each other and the guy asked if they knew each other by chance as he thought they had seen each other before. Layla started to get worried since she had never met him, and she didn't know what to do. The only thing she decided was to keep calm. Layla replied that it couldn't be true, and they certainly hadn't met. The guy didn't understand it, but apologized for bothering her and left. Then Layla wondered why she had such an uneasy feeling, for he seemed awfully familiar, and maybe it was because he was the same age as her father. Just then, Duke Hippert walked over to Daria and took her hand and kissed it. She was shocked, and asked what kind of indecent behavior he seemed to miss. It hadn't been a day since they'd met, she said, but she'd picked up on the fact that to him their separation had lasted an eternity. He also took her hand, and it made Layla tense again, but she figured that since they were together, it was unlikely anyone would notice. After that, she realized that everyone was looking at them. Absolutely everyone. The Duke asked what difference their appearance made since they were together. She said there were too many unnecessary eyes, so it was better to go somewhere else, but Duke said he would, but asked that she not say he liked hairy men with potbellies, since he'd seen her talking to the guy. That's when Layla yelled out what kind of nonsense he was talking about, and Duke turned his attention to the guy and said that it seems that man really excited her, as she even had a conversation with him and then leaked it. Then she thought that the Duke must be jealous, and began to laugh. The Duke asked what was so funny, and she remarked that she did not care for the Baron at all. Then he lifted her hand to his face and asked her to pay more attention to him. She laughed again and thought to herself that he was really like a puppy. When Layla was waiting for the Duke on the bench, he came very late, and she began to ask him why he was so late, and where he had stayed, to which the Duke replied that he had several things to do. Also he was looking for something, but he had no luck at all. I realized I looked like a moose in search of a shadow. Shadow is what they call a cursed ring. Unlike a regular ring, it doesn't come back, but stays floating in space. Cursed rings feed off of regular rings, and the regular ring loses its power. And since the owners of the regular rings started complaining to Rutger and Hyatt, it was assigned to find the shadows, but it's not that easy. Then she saw Mrs. Hyland coming, and decided that she was the key figure in discovering Lasius's mine. Therefore she needed to approach her urgently. She got up, started walking, and said that Madame would help retrieve the mine. The Duke then said that she should listen to him before she went. He then stopped her and told her to kiss him. She was alarmed and asked if he was joking. The house guests saw all this and were very surprised. They thought their engagement was just a show, but apparently Layla is full of feelings. Love used to be completely out of character for Layla Marshmallow, but apparently it had changed now, and the kind of Layla Marshmallow they really liked. When he was about to kiss Layla, she stopped him with her hand and apologized, saying it wouldn't do. They each had their own things to do, so it was better to separate, and they would meet later. So Layla ran and met with Mrs. Hyland, and after the meeting she said that she heard rumors that she was getting married again, and also congratulated her on it. Whereupon Layla again said mistress to her, at which point she requested that Layla simply call her Madame Hyland. Then Madame was distracted and saw her ex-husband, and she was sure they were not on good terms. She knew things were strained there, but not that strained. Then Layla thought about how she hadn't expected her to show her dislike so openly. She wanted to change the location of the conversation, but it seemed Madame wanted to peek at Dawson. And then Madame said, or what she wanted to know about the marriage. She told Layla that it was true, that she was supporting Duke Hubert. Layla didn't understand how she knew that, but she said it was just that he was looking at her intently. And then Layla asked for a change of scenery as she wanted to talk about something, and it also concerns Madame. So Layla started to follow Helene. When they arrived and sat down in a private room at the table, the first thing Layla said was to ask to be called just Layla. She began to ask Madame if she wished to take the lead. Madame was very tense, and she didn't understand why Layla had brought me here. She started to get nervous. Layla said not to worry and to be calm as she just wants to settle and she thinks she is perfect for this particular position. Madam said that she needs to think about it. She then asked that if it was true after all, she could definitely make it happen. And Layla said that she had the opportunity right now to give her what she wanted, so they needed to make a deal. Madame said she would trust her and asked what she was interested in. Then Layla suggested that if she took possession of the black diamond, she would also own the mine. And then Madame said that Layla could rely on her. And Layla also implied that she would raise her to the top position in a year if all went well. And they parted ways. The Duke then approached Rutger and said that he had found the shadows, and so he needed to get Roxanne and they would manage without him. Then he told him to take care, and go back. Rutger then approached Layla, told her that the Duke had some urgent business and asked her to take care of it, and also told her to drop the formalities. Thought that since it was so urgent, maybe he'd found the shadows after all then, since he'd left so suddenly. Then he told her not to have any worries being around him, and Layla said that of course it would have been better if they had still traveled there, been around, but he said he had to look after her, and wasn't at the event right now. Afterward, he remarked that one of their knights was traveling by the way, and Layla said that she hadn't met him just that day, because apparently he was away on business that very day. She thought it was her second favorite character after Hira, so it was also so sad for her that they couldn't meet. So then she decided to ask Kir if he could introduce them, since she wanted to see him just once. Hitit was standing in his room when an unidentified person knocked on his door. He immediately thought about it, and wasn't expecting anyone, so he didn't think about who it could be. But Rutger came into the room and asked if Heathit had locked himself in the room again, but Heathit asked that he leave and not disturb him. Then Rutger teased him and asked him if he was going to kill him or something worse, and said that he was interfering with his thinking, and that Rutger didn't know anything at all. Rutger asked him if Hizet had shut himself in his room and pondered his actions, to which he received the answer that he was not pondering, but trying to remember what he had missed. But still he asked if he could leave the room for a moment, as Rutger had brought something for him, and he must be interested, to which Hizeth said that he did not care at all, and was not interested in what he had prepared there. He asked that Hizid not push him and not answer so rudely. At that moment behind his back already Layla was eavesdropping on what was going on there. Then he said why he came here with that attitude, but Rutger said he'd enjoy it, and he might even be surprised. At that moment behind his back already Layla was eavesdropping on what was going on there. Then Layla came into the room, and in the original, Hizi became a mentor who was like a brother to Hir. As a fan of Hir, she didn't like Hizet much, since he didn't like many people at all. Hizeth asked what they had come to see him for, to which he received the reply that if God forbid, he was rude to this lady, his future could not be called rosy. So she went up to him, introduced herself and said her name was Layla, and very soon she would marry his master. He said it was a pleasure to meet her. Izid then decided to ask if Excellency had already returned, to which he received the reply that he had discovered the infected ring during the party, and had gone in search of Roxanne. After which he said that there were also very responsible tasks for him, namely to go for a walk with Layla. While Hyde was about to go out for a walk with Layla, Layla was waiting for him, and when he came out, he asked for taking so long to get ready. But Layla said it was no big deal, and it wasn't as long as he might have thought. Layla thought that Hizi, you were really on your form, and since Rutger was afraid that Hizid would blame his assignments to cheer him up, she ordered him to take a walk with him. Layla was very pleased as Hizet looked just like in the original tune. When they got outside, they didn't know what to talk about, and Layla decided to ask about Lasius, and if it was true that he was always so busy, to which she got the answer that he had more things to do than most knights of the order. So she asked what he did. He explained that their assignment was to find a magical black stone belonging to Jupiter. Layla realized that magical black stones were very valuable, but most of the stones in the mine were lumps of coal. Moreover, the magic stones didn't match well with the rings. That was why it was not worthwhile to use them directly, and sorting them would take too much time and money, making it difficult to dispose of them. Magic stones and mines that are hard to work with, she thought to herself. She also wondered if there was a way to use them effectively. Then he noticed that she was silent about something, and asked all, to which she said that perhaps she could soon give Lysias a very lovely gift. Then Hizit squinted and began to look at one point, as if he had noticed something there, and Layla asked him what was wrong. He replied that for a moment he thought he saw something. Layla said that apparently he was exhausted from the walk and so it might be worth ending it, but he said he was fine. A few days later, when she returned home, she approached the mother of her ex-husband who had died, at which point the mother asked her if she had brought her son's will. She said to quickly hand it to her and thought to herself that she was just bluffing, whereupon Layla gave the piece of paper to her. She immediately tore it up and started screaming that this couldn't be happening, that first Layla had invaded their family and now she wanted to take over the estate. "It's outrageous, and it's also fake," she said. To which Layla replied that it was indeed a forgery, and the mother had torn the copy and the original is not here. Whereupon she offered to show proof of deposit in the Akabalt Bank. Then the mother thought Layla was mocking her on purpose and called her a lowly woman. Afterward, Layla said she must have heard about a potential remarriage partner, and she said she was Duchess Layla Hupert from now on. 10. And asked that she be treated like a duchess. Then her mother didn't believe her and thought she was manipulating the Herzo, that she was scum. Layla then said that she had come here to propose to her, after which her mother immediately became kinder and asked if Layla would like it. Layla immediately thought she had changed her attitude and said that she wanted two things. First, a permit allowing direct travel to the Nixon Kingdom, the Marshmallow family has it, and second is custody of here. And that's all she wants, she said. At that time, the mother said that no one in the family is trading, only the Heelan family. So she doesn't even really need a permit, and actually shy and fragile here, and absolutely no need for it. Layla then said she wasn't demanding it for nothing. She would provide fair compensation for it all. Then the mother thought to herself that what a fool Layla really was, and she certainly didn't know what Layla would actually offer her. But she realized that she should feign disappointment to get a lot more. And then she said that although she didn't want to part with what Layla wanted from her, but still what Layla could offer her. And then Layla thought and said that Duke Hupert had recently commandeered a mine with a black magic stone. Layla said she would give it to her and would it be enough? This was very strange to Mom as it was very expensive. She didn't believe that she would give her a mine of black magic stones, but afterwards she realized that the mine was full of those incredibly valuable black stones, and that was only a big plus for her. She also thought to herself that Layla didn't realize what she was definitely losing, after which she did not seem satisfied. But her mother at once said she was satisfied with everything, and proposed to make a bargain, whereupon she called a servant and demanded that she bring the contract urgently. Layla sat down at the table then, relaxed, and realized that she had the urgent matter taken care of. All that was left was for her to think about how to tell Hiru that she was getting married again. She considered the first option, how she just shows up with Duke and tells him it's his new father, and they meet and say hello. But realized that option falls away as it's a bit too sudden and she doesn't want it so much as it might even scare him. The second option was to apologize to Hira and tell her that even though Layla had changed, he was probably having a hard time with her. So she'd found him a better daddy as well, and he wouldn't have to see her for the next year. After which she thought, what a load of crap. After which she smirked a little and didn't understand why things were so hard, after all things had been going very well until now. But this was already a real test. After which she realized that it was best to be honest and straightforward. She called Hir to the table, and when he came she told him to sit down at the table. When the guy came in, he also wanted to eat the pie and asked permission to do so, to which Layla said she had made it especially for him, and he could eat as much as he wanted. Layla was very pleased that the guy liked it. She had prepared it to somehow at least smooth the edges and not shock Hira too much with the news of her marriage. That's when she saw that the guy was full and had crumbs and chocolate all over his face, and she decided to help him, but afterwards she realized she'd rather have him on his own. She then took a napkin that had "Happy" here written on it, and that's when the guy couldn't stand it and cried. Layla, have you already rushed to ask him what happened? Why did he cry? And he said that she was very nice to him, and he wasn't nice to her at all. But Hir didn't know there was another person in this body, and the abrupt change frightened him. He must have tolerated it all this time. Then she decided to apologize and say that she must have been out of her mind with shock after her husband died, and I promise I will never hate him so much again. Then she took him in her arms and hugged him, and he cried once more. Then she said she had some very good news, and if he could hear it. Then she told him that their family would soon be complete. So she decided to marry a man who will be a very good father to him. He is very kind and will treat him well. But if he's my daddy, let him tell her that. Also, she picked up on the fact that the guy himself also needed time to think things over, and then he said that although his mom cared, he also wanted his dad to take care of him, unlike his current one. Then Layla said that this father would care sincerely for his happiness, unlike Viscount Marshmallow and his wife. So she asked him if he was okay with it. She would introduce them to each other, and they drove to Duke Hubert's. As they drove, she noticed that the guy seemed to be worried, and he was shaking a little. Layla understood all this and took it normally. When they arrived, they immediately sat down at the table all together to celebrate and get to know each other. And that's when the guy already said he was very much low and couldn't sit like that. Then Layla suggested that he sit on her lap, and the guy said it was not etiquette. But Layla said he could do whatever he wanted since he was still young, and no one would judge him for it. When he sat on his lap, he was very comfortable. But he noticed that his future father was looking at him with such an intimidating face, and he found himself thinking that it was very impolite for him to sit on his lap. And he also began to worry that he didn't like him in some way. Then his father said hello to him and told him that the boy would soon be his son, and he would at least get closer to him. That's why he suggested that Here do sit on his lap, so they would get even closer and faster. He asked that Layla not to worry, as he was sure he could handle anything, since there was nothing complicated about it. She said okay, but only if Here didn't mind. After which she told him to say if he didn't want to, that you're not there. But he thought to himself that it was a little scary. But since his mom said his new dad was a kind man and they liked each other, it was okay, and he must be good. Then he came up to the Hubert and that a few compliments, that he was very calm and confident. And Layla asked if he had already dealt with children, to which I got the reply that barely, but he still feels he's good at everything. Duke then asked that the guy tell him what he wanted to eat, and he also mentioned that he had heard that he liked chocolate macaroons, and immediately he offered it to him. Ouch, upon seeing this, realized that he was indeed a natural father, as he even picked up on a few nuances right away. Besides, she noticed that they looked very suspiciously alike, and didn't look like a beautiful couple. Afterward, he helped the guy's mouth come out a little, and said that he had also heard that he liked pudding, or maybe ice cream. The guy was very pleased and knew no bounds to his joy. Layla said that Lasius had won him over, and at that moment it was like a weight was lifted off her shoulders. She was very happy that everything had gone so well. After the meal, the lad fell asleep in the Duke's arms, and Layla asked that he put the lad to bed. So they called a servant and ordered her to put the lad to bed and be very careful while doing so. So I asked Layla to go for a walk while their baby was sleeping, and he asked her a question. What flowers she liked best, and he said that as soon as she said so, he would plant any flowers in the garden. But instead of flowers, Layla had asked to hang a swing in the garden, which she had personally made herself, and she had noticed that Her was very fond of the swing. Then the Duke led her into the garden and asked her if she liked the place, to which she said that yes, of course she did. But it was nothing like the place where she had walked last time with Hyseth. Hearing this, the Duke was very surprised and didn't understand when it was that she had time to walk with Heezy there, but Layla had swept him up and asked him to walk with her. Then it seemed to Layla that the Duke was very nervous, and she asked, "What's wrong? Why so nervous?" He said that he was nervous because of her company, and the fact that their hands were touching each other. Layla thought that at first they had kept their distance, but now they were quite close together and it felt right. Afterwards the Duke offered her a rest and told her that there was one secret place in the garden, and then Layla thought to herself that the same secret place from the original story. If so, she is very happy. In the novel, Here tried relentlessly to summon the ring, but there was no way the ring would appear as easily as he would have liked. Each time he would come to the same spot, holding back tears, continuing again and again until he succeeded. Then she realized that this was the place because the novel said that this secret place was in the Duke's garden. And Layla happily replied that she was ready, and when they got there she immediately looked at the place and asked who made it, to which she got the answer that his mom did. As she approached the bench, the Duke said it was a good place to sit, and she was maddened by the surprise of Here sitting there. Well, since there was only one seat, she said it would be a pity if she sat there alone, and so the Duke sat down in that seat, then invited Layla to sit on his lap. Layla said she wasn't a child, and then he took her hand and pulled her, and it came out so she sat on his lap after all. Then he immediately remarked that she was very lucky to have such a husband. As it turned out, when he yanked her, he discreetly also put a wedding gift around her neck to embellish her beauty. She didn't understand how it happened, and she didn't believe there was a ring in that diamond. She didn't know how he put it in there. She said she loved it, and also recalled that Duke had promised to teach her how to summon the ring, after which Duke had also remarked that he was only thinking about their conversations together. Then Layla asked that he teach her exactly how to make the ring today. The Duke said he would teach her as much as she wanted. Afterwards, he remarked that he had never taught anyone before, so he didn't know if he would be good at it. But Layla told him not to worry, and if it didn't work out, then she was a bad student, and he was a bad teacher. That's why the Duke said that he couldn't let her be a bad student, and so he would do everything in his power to make it work. Afterward, he said that this was his second gift for her, as he remembered that she also really liked him and was crazy about him. Then Layla was very happy. She was very pleased that he had made so many gifts for her. She decided that next time she would also bake him cookies and hoped that he would like them very much, because she also remembered that he had asked for them once. Duke said that honestly, he knew how to use the ring from birth, so Hysit was probably more suited to her as a teacher, but he didn't like it at all. At the time, Layla didn't understand why the Duke disliked it so much when she interacted with the knight. She had absolutely always noticed that as soon as it came to that, he would immediately get nervous, and he didn't like to hear it. Then the Duke said he would now teach her how to use rings instead of a bullet for a gun, began to show her what movements to make, where to lead from where to where, finally what to do. After that, he said all she had to do was point the ring where she wanted to shoot. But Layla said that she didn't even know how to summon the ring, and the Duke said that she would learn that on her own, and she would figure it out. And why not just shoot it? Maybe she'll feel it that way. She began to think that even with the help of knights, assistants, also teachers, Here was able to create his first ring after only 8 years, so she really doubted that she would be able to do it so quickly and easily. But even so, at least she could try, since there was nothing wrong with it, she thought. As soon as she fired the shot, she succeeded the first time, and both of them were shocked. The Duke didn't understand how she had succeeded the first time, and Layla thought it was so easy that she hadn't even expected it. A little later, Layla was very pleased that everything was going too well. Absolutely nothing in the novel. After all, everything had been so calm from the beginning. But then something very unbelievable happened. And then a servant girl burst into her room and said, "His Majesty the Emperor." And at this very moment, the Emperor came into the room and said he had come for her. Then Layla also greeted him and said that she was greeting the son of the Empire. And the Emperor said that it was hard to even think of a duller greeting. When he came up to her, he took her face and told her she looked a lot like his cat that ran away a couple years ago. And then he thought to himself that it was time to deal with her. Layla didn't know what he was talking about and wondered why he was comparing her to his cat, who had run off somewhere. She tried to remember if she and Layla knew each other in the original, as it all seemed very strange, and remembered that Emperor Enric was an antagonist in the original story, being a shadow. He summoned distorted rings and constantly interfered with Hera and Lasius. Although there was no mention in the novel that Layla and Enrique knew each other, Layla thought. Then he put his arm completely around her waist, moving closer to her. He said it had been too long since they'd last seen each other, and it had been so long since they'd seen each other that he'd forgotten what she looked like. And she looked so much better. He then took her in his arms, and on Layla's request to put her in her place, he said it would be difficult, as he had come for the courtesy of taking her away like a gentleman. Namely, he had come to kidnap her, he told her. Layla has been trying to make any sense of anything at all, and understand what's going on, and she doesn't know the whole situation. But she definitely shouldn't get involved in all of this. She needs to find out what their relationship was with Layla in the affair, as it's all very strange. And considering everything he'd said, namely that she'd run away from someone somewhere, apparently they had more than just friendship, since he was acting very openly around her, as if they were a couple for each other. The Emperor then brought her a cup of tea and told her it was her favorite and offered her a taste, at which point Layla decided to take a dangerous step. She decided to play it differently, and first she had to pretend that she didn't know Enrique. She said that she thanked him for his kindness, but she didn't like flower teas at all, as he was not to her taste at all. But upon hearing this, the Emperor only smirked and said then let Layla take a look at it. And he made a black ring with a wave of his hand. Then he realized that Layla knew that he could use the ring. And she realized that the distorted ring followed the pure ring, and he purposely showed it to her. Which meant that in the novel, Layla could have used the ring too. and she realized that there was no way that could happen. After all, the emperor was using Layla to cleanse his distorted rings. The novel stated that although Enrique had little right to the throne, at some point, through the power of the ring, he gained a great deal of support and was able to become that emperor. She kept wondering how he got people to believe he was using a pure ring, but it all makes sense if he was using Layla. It does look very suspicious, but apparently it is. And then Layla thought it all looked very strange, since the novel said that the ring rarely chose anyone. She was the one who remembered exactly what her ring had chosen. She thought Enrique had found out about it and used it to become ruler. But Layla did not want to be used by him, so her solution was to run away and marry the Viscount Marshmallow. And even the ruler couldn't ignore the fact that she had a husband and come to her so easily. That's why he was so bold to kidnap her. Then he continued and told her to look at her hand. When she looked at her hand, she saw a ring there, and he said that she must have remembered it still, since the ring had cleared. Well, then Layla realized that he seemed to be losing patience, as he hadn't seen the purified ring in a while, so he had come here, and if it continued like this he wasn't going to just let her go, so she decided it was time for her to go back. But he stopped her, took her hand, and told her that he hadn't finished what he was going to say at all. He said she had been a stray cat and had lost all her manners, but she immediately corrected him and said she was not a pet, addressing him as Your Highness. After that he took his hands off her, apologized, and said that he was wrong after all. But even though she wasn't a cat, she couldn't let him go. Whereupon he remarked that he did not know whether she had used Duke Huberto to avoid, or whether she had some other plan. But the Duke, famous for his indifference to women, could not love her in any way. So most likely she had proposed a sham marriage to him so that she could remarry. After which he remarks that the only one who truly loves her is him, and takes her hand and kisses it. It made Layla a little uncomfortable then, and she didn't understand why absolutely everyone was always talking about love. And then he said it was all because he loved her, and asked if she thought there was anyone else who would care for her more than he did. And then Layla thought, is she really destined to suffer from people wanting to use her for the rest of her days? This is somehow wrong. And then she remembered all the times when some moments someone cared for her very much. The same Hubert who had said many times that he didn't want her to get hurt anymore when they got married and became family to each other. And that's when she realized that there were some people in the world who genuinely cared about her, and some who were just out to take advantage of her. Then she apologized and said that she could not agree with His Highness as she already had a loving man. The Emperor, hearing this, was very surprised and could not believe that she was only joking. She also asked once more that he forgive her rudeness. But she had to bow out, and then he admitted that he had lost. Then he said that in that case, he would give her one thing that she had been asking for a long time, and he also asked her not to be angry with him anymore. Then Layla realized that he still wasn't taking anything she said seriously, so she decided to reaffirm to him that she had absolutely no desire or reason to receive anything from His Highness. While they weren't talking, there was an unexplained knock at the door, and Layla shouted that whoever was there couldn't go inside without permission, and they wanted to continue the dialogue. But then she heard this stranger introduce himself as Duke Lasius. She was very surprised and did not understand what to do, for she did not believe how the moose could know where to find her, and what he had come here for. That's when Duke walked into the room and started asking Layla what she was doing here, and says that finding her was a very difficult task, but he did get better. Layla decided to play along with him then, and told him that he had walked in here at a very good time, and thought it was a very good time to show the Emperor their relationship, so that he would finally get behind her. And then she put her arm around him and told him that she was just about to go back to him, but at that moment. Whereupon the Emperor interrupted them and told them what it was, for insolence. Was he an empty space here for both of them, and when the Duke so approached him, he said that did His Majesty have the right to condemn him after shamelessly kidnapping his future wife. And after which he swept up and asked that he not ruin his own scholarly relationships built up over generations of their families, His Majesty. And he said that if such a thing happened again, he would have no reason to wear formal clothes, and he would definitely come to visit them, only in a slightly different way. After the Duke picked up Layla and they took the carriage home, he began to question her on the road about what she had talked about with His Majesty the Emperor. Layla admitted to him that she didn't even understand what he was talking about, because he was talking nonsense. And then the Duke told her that the next time he bothered her, just have her shoot him, and for the rest, He would personally take care of the rest, and there would be no problems, no need to worry about it at all. Layla was very curious then, and she didn't fully understand why he was willing to go through all this trouble. Was it really just for her? To which he immediately replied to her that she was his wife after all, and it didn't matter at all that they were a couple under contract for only 1 year. They were still a couple. He said he was going to truly love his wife until his contract expired. What's not to joke about? Layla then decided to ask him how he knew where she was, and all he said was that he had come to visit her at the estate because he suddenly felt as if some filth had come to visit her. And that's when Layla realized that the moose ring he'd given her had been given as a necklace, reacting to the ruined ring specifically. I noticed it, and I got there just in time. But she only thought about it in her head, and at that moment the Duke said that the maid had told him what had happened, and he thought it would look pretty cool if he showed up. Then the Duke said that Enrique was probably a shadow, and he had been looking for him for so long, and it turned out he was right in front of him. In the novel, Lasius figured out the identities but had to stop investigating without any results. And all this just because of some long-standing agreement between the imperial family and the family, stubbornly, instead of destroying Huberto, who is a huge threat to the imperial family. They decided to team up with him, and because of this, the Akabald Empire gained more power than it could actually have. Since Heir had gotten rid of all the members of the current ruling family anyway, no one would know that the imperial family had paid Hubert for the deal, she thought, and that was a very good thing. And if was now unable to touch the emperor, they would pay a huge price. Lasius knew that for sure. Then they arrived home. Layla thanked the Duke and told him thanks for coming and helping her. But the Duke said it was not at all necessary to say these trivial thanks. After all, they are a couple. It is not difficult for him at all. Layla immediately said that on the contrary, such words are very important in a relationship, so that both parties are not disappointed in something, and if anything they immediately told each other about it. They kept it to themselves. And then, suddenly, Lasius took a sharp hold of his heart and began to breathe deeply. Layla immediately saw this and began to worry about him and asked what was wrong. Was he in pain? Lasius said no, just the light tapped a perpetual rhythm when she called his name. And that surprised her a lot. She didn't know how to react to something like that, since she hadn't even had situations like that. Then the Emperor, when I got to my house, he sat down at his chair and thought to himself that he had been convinced to the end that this contract was only a simple deception. But as it turned out, it was not so after all, and so it came to pass that they really appeared to him to love each other. The Duke then thought that the Emperor's face was as if he really loved Layla, but the Emperor decided that this was even better for him, because in this way he would achieve even more than he wanted through Layla. He would have more power because of the fact that he and the Duke would be like one family. He would be able to use, and roughly speaking, both of them. 10. Layla decided she needed to show her gratitude to the Duke for saving her from Enrique, so she decided to bake him cookies. The sweet cookies he'd once mentioned he'd wanted her to make. She decided to make them in the shape of hearts and thought it would be really cool. She also hoped the moose wouldn't care, since they were just cookies. When she got home, she met the guys, who said no one knew she was coming. But she said she decided to surprise them, so she asked that they not tell anyone about it. She also decided since she was here, she would definitely take a look at the training ground. When she met 2 of his knights, she decided to treat them to a cookie, as she is very kind and likes to share. She gave them some, and they said it was very tasty. Also, they love sweet things, and they also got the phrase out that the gentleman does not have a sweet tooth at all. That's why they don't eat something sweet very often, they said. Layla, after hearing that the Duke doesn't hate sweets, she immediately decided to give the whole picture of the cookies to them, and told them to share with the other knights. She also said it was a gift for them. She was a little disappointed, but realized later that there was no point, since in that case she would cook something else for him that he would actually like. When she left from there, the Duke came back and said that since he was dealing with an emergency, he didn't even know Layla was around. When he approached his knight, he found out that she had been here a while ago, but had quickly left. Then the knights managed to tell the Duke that Layla's going was not wonderful, as she had baked an incredibly delicious cookie that absolutely everyone loved. In fact, it was so delicious that they could not tear themselves away from it. The Duke got a little upset about this and told them that since this was the case, they must have eaten a lot of cookies and had plenty of energy, so they should increase their training next week. And the Duke immediately thought that he hadn't expected himself to be so furious with just some cookies. Then he thought that he couldn't imagine letting Layla go and letting her go after a year, and he had to think of a way to keep her. When she got home, she was sitting at the table with her son, and he began to tell her how Jane's servant had read him a tale about some witch a couple days ago. And afterward Jane had said that witches fatten up little children and then eat them. After which he started crying immediately, at which point Layla said that couldn't be the case, and said that there was no way she was going to eat him after he got better. Then Layla said she didn't even have the guts to eat a cute little baby like him, to which he replied that if he got better, he wouldn't be so cute anymore. Then Layla said that it's not true because he's nice because he's attentive and appreciates the little things. That's why he will be a wonderful person in the future, a brave man fighting evil. When Layla read this novel, she really wanted to say those words in the original. Here was agonizing over the changes in his appearance, and this time she wouldn't let it happen. Then her son said out loud that he wanted to protect Mom because she was suffering because of Dad's sudden death. That's why he doesn't want Mom to suffer, and he said he would protect her. Layla also told him that she would protect him herself as well, and thought to herself that she was only doing this so that he wouldn't have to suffer as well as he did in the original story of this novel. After that, she sat in her room, writing, and realized that in order to protect the Kier, she needed to take care of a few tasks. First, a plan to change the head had to be devised, and at that moment she realized that the moose's ring was vibrating, which meant that Vasya had arrived. And then Lasius himself came into the room and greeted her. He brought with him a bouquet of flowers and placed it on the table. Layla asked what it was, to which he replied that it was his gift. It was that she had fed his knights cookies, very delicious, for which they were very grateful to her. He also decided to remind her that she left and didn't even say hello to him. She immediately realized what the situation was then, and that's when Lasius said he was very sad about the situation. But she thought to herself, what should she say to him, since she hadn't taken the cookies to him because she'd learned he hated sweets. That's why she left without saying hello. And she also left because she was worried that the visit would disturb him too. But he immediately gave her a wink that she couldn't even imagine how happy he would be when he felt the energy of the ring on the grounds of his estate. And that's when she really realized that he could feel the energy of the ring inside when she was anywhere near him. And so he immediately went to see her and came to her house. He told how his knight had laughed at him too, for he was the only one who had not answered her fine cookie. But she said that she had been told that he hated sweets, and afterwards she confessed that she had only gone away because she had found it out. Then he said not at all and asked that she put her arms around him. But she interrupted him and said that she had sold the past to make the Senor the head of the hill. He didn't understand why she kept changing the subject to work, and she said there was nothing that could be done about it, as they really needed to get the mine back. He was very disappointed then. She realized he was a little frustrated. He even confirmed it himself. After which, she immediately said that they had sold the right-of-way to the Marshmallow family to the Nixon family, on the condition that he would give her the mine producing the magic stone that the Upert Knights had recently searched for. Then the Duke was very surprised. The fact that she had sold the rights of way in that coal mine instead of magic stones. It was just regular coal there, and that it was written in the contract, but she just didn't notice it. So it's a very good thing. Then the Duke confessed that everything seems much easier to him when she is near him. That's why he doesn't even want to part with her. She began to think and ponder on the subject, and realized that he still wanted her to help him. Then, unlike in the original story, it might play right into her hands. Then she decided to stop him as he was leaving and tell him there was no point in being sad and at work then. That's exactly what I said. And that very soon, in that case, he would hand over the mine to her, but also asked what he would get in return by approaching her. Layla realized she was acting weird, like she was having strange feelings, a class wasu, but didn't understand what was going on inside her. All she knew was that Lasius was behaving according to the contract and nothing more, because in the original he had absolutely no interest in women. That's why she concludes that he's doing it for the contract. That's why she should put aside her silly thoughts and decided to tell him that she would bake him cookies. And this time, she wouldn't give them to anyone else but him, which made him happy. A few days later, she baked cookies again and came to the Duke's estate and asked where the Duke was, since he wasn't home. She said they were supposed to be practicing wielding the ring, but to which the knights replied to her that they had gone to investigate the area where they had discovered the tainted ring. And that's when Layla realized that in the original, the research was stopped after it was revealed that Enrique was a shadow. But apparently Lasius decided to change his mind. And by doing so, the more the story differs from the original story, the more useless the information Layla possesses will be. From this we can understand that if the value of the information Layla is passing on to Lasius drops, it may simply cease to be of interest to him. Layla then said that since Lasius wasn't here, maybe she could practice wielding the ring with them, and they happily agreed. Rutger said he was great at training people. He taught Hyzeth as well to the rest. Layla then asked, and said she wanted to learn not to channel the ring, but to learn how to make it faster. Then Rutger proposed a wager in which they would compete together with Hysis, and the loser would have to fulfill the winner's wish. And she agreed, and immediately thought that if she won, she could ask them to teach her son how to handle the ring. Hyzeth also said that he likes the idea, and in that case he would even close his eyes to make it more interesting. Then Rutger explained the rules and said that the winner is the one who catches the most rings of 3 flying around in a circle, and started this challenge. Layla realized that in this challenge you not only need to be able to aim well, but you also need to know the terrain well. And in this situation, Hyzeth is much better, since he knows everything here and can easily use the ring. She decided that she just had to try harder, since just because she only knew how to let it out, it didn't mean she didn't have a chance. So she went looking for the first ring and went into some cabin. Jana was sure it was hidden in some such place, decided that nothing terrible would happen if she didn't look there. She realized that this place hadn't been used for a very long time, as there was a lot of dust, and she even started coughing and already thought here. But at the last moment, she saw the ring and was already aiming for it. But then, realized that this ring was tainted, and she couldn't figure out how it had ended up in Hubert's training ground. Had the spies done the work? After all, the novel didn't mention anything about spies using shadow aura. Then she realized what a shadow meant, someone who gives spies their orders. That's what she should tell Lasius when he came back. Then that ring started flying away, and she thought maybe Berger was nearby, and that's why it's headed toward him. And then she saw one ring hidden in the foliage. She thought it was easy, and hid it, and decided she had one more to find. At that moment, the Duke came up behind her and put his arm around her, thus making her very frightened, and he asked what she was doing here. She said he scared her a lot and asked when he arrived, but he said he just got back, and since there was some nasty energy coming from her aura, he came to her right away. Lasius felt her touching the ruined ring, and apparently tracked her by it immediately. She explained to him that there was a black ring in that warehouse, and she thought it was a spy working there, as it was all very strange. He said she was right, but advised her not to touch him so thoughtlessly next time. She then told him that she had made a bet with Hizi. There, whoever found more of Rutger's rings would win. Then the Duke decided that he would help her win, and told her which way was the last ring she needed to catch. She decided it sounded like cheating, but she couldn't just ignore his words, so she decided to go that way. When they went down there, she didn't understand what the place was, and he said it was an underground warehouse, specifically an heirloom of their family. He said he would show her everything now, as it was just family, and she should know what was here and how. As they walked, they saw the ring, and he said it was unlikely that it would show up here anytime soon. So he would show her the family heirloom first. A prisoner has been passed down in the Hubert family from generation to generation. Everyone thinks the imperial family gave the Hubert family a treasure, but it's a magic tool. All the Hubert rings of previous generations are encased here, and after the founding of the empire, the imperial family feared the Ilpert family's rings. They created a squad of ring knights by gathering ordinary people who rarely dealt with the ring, and all the knights were useless against one Hubert. It was for this reason that the imperial family imposed some restrictions on the Hubert family. Since the Yuppert ring is imprisoned if he raises the power in the imperial family on the Yuppert blood, so the curse will fall, but he didn't lock his ring in it. Layla asked, and that nothing would be done about it? And he replied that of course he was tried to resist, but even the emperor was stunned, and his strength. Then Layla realized that in the original, when Heir became emperor, nothing happened because he didn't have Hubert blood flowing in his veins. And after which the Duke said that, and after which the Duke further suggested that she go to Rutger's ring, and if she caught it, could it play with him? Asked at her. But Layla said that she wasn't quite sure what would work since she and Here were going on a picnic tomorrow. So she has a lot of things to prepare and she doesn't have much time. But the Duke immediately said that he had helped her find the ring, and so he asked that she let him keep them company. Then she really thought about it and realized that it was a very good idea and a great opportunity for the two of them to get to know each other better, and agreed to it. The Duke immediately said that he was very excited about the situation, and it was unlikely that he would now be able to sleep tonight. Whereupon he asked, since she has found all the rings in one, what prize awaits her? Layla immediately said that Hidit would grant her any wish. And then she went on and said that she had wanted something from him since the very first time they met. The next day when Duke, Layla, and Here met together, they were walking and Duke said he had rented a boat. And the guy was very excited to be boating for the first time. He loved it immensely, and they decided they would all go sailing together. As they were skating, Layla asked if it was scary for Hiru to look at the water like that, to which he said not at all. And he really liked the way the sun reflected off the water. It was very beautiful. At that moment he looked down at the water and saw something truly very magical and beautiful, and almost fell out of the water. But at the last moment he was caught by the Duke, and told him to keep his head down that much more. But the guy said there was something floating there and just wanted to catch it. But they quickly explained to him that it was very dangerous, and he could fall behind the boat, whereupon he apologized and fell unconscious in their arms. They decided that they needed to get back to shore quickly and show him to the doctor as it was unclear what it was. The doctor, on the other hand, said there were no external injuries, and he was sure the baby was just scared. But when asked why he still didn't wake up, since so much time had already passed, the doctor replied that he was just sound asleep, and pretty soon he would be, and said that there was no worry. Well, whereupon he remarked that it was just his humble opinion, and maybe the problem was inside, and there was nothing he could do about it. The Duke let him go and said he could go and began to comfort Layla. After all, the doctor said he would wake up soon. He said they just had to wait, and then he pulled out some letter and gave it to her, or said it was addressed to her, and he had waited a long time for the moment to give it to her. This letter said the following: "This guy isn't as bad as the last guy, but still falls short of you. This is a waste of time, so please don't die." When she read this letter, she realized that it was as anonymous as the one addressed to Mrs. Marshmallow. She didn't understand who was sending all these letters. After she read it, the Duke immediately asked why she was hiding it, to which he replied that there was nothing important in it, so she put it away. Afterwards, I asked him if he wanted to read it, and he said he wasn't interested in it initially. But since she started hiding it, he became very curious, and I didn't let him read the letter. After reading it, he realized that he didn't know, of course, who had written it, but apparently he had hit exactly the right point. He didn't even believe it, but he realized how much he was inferior to Layla, and afterwards he said that he wasn't hurt by those words at all, so that Layla wouldn't worry. And the Duke said he couldn't wait to announce their wedding date, and he was overjoyed at what a wonderful wife he had. Then she thought that Lassia would look favorably on their engagement, and she wondered if they might even keep their marriage alive. As she thought about it, Here woke up and she was very pleased, but he immediately started crying and screaming to be forgiven. After all, he was wrong. No one understood what was going on. Then the doctor was called, and the doctor said that it was a temporary loss of memory, and he had suffered a severe shock. And against this background he temporarily lost his memory, but there was nothing to worry about, as it would come back to him very soon. Layla said that only relatively recent memories had been erased. She hadn't seen Here like that in quite some time. For just a moment, she had let herself forget and committed an unforgivable crime against him. Layla realized that it had been overconfident to think that she would be able to fix things so easily after what had happened, but now she was sure of something for sure. She realized for sure that once their grim contract was over and she would have to leave the estate completely, she needed to prepare herself for parting ways with Lasius as well. It was a very unpleasant thing for her to realize such things. After a few days, Hiru's memory returned, just as the doctor had said it would. He didn't remember the moment he'd lost her at all. It was as if he'd been asleep and then woken up. Then the maid came up to Layla and said that she was seeing the girl for the first time in a long time, that she was getting ready to be about to be married. With that expression on her face, she was constantly displeased about something. Layla didn't understand why the servant was so energetic and why things were so different from the original in general, and perhaps she was only so friendly with close friends. Then she said, or that apparently the rumors that the Duke was willing to do anything she wanted for Layla were just rumors. To which Layla said they won't have endless fights like normal married couples, as it's just a prenup for a year and purely a business relationship. She said it was all about her son, who was sick a couple days ago while in the service. As she remembered about her son, she said that then she understood why Layla was walking around so worried. After all, when your own child is sick, it's impossible to be calm and not worry. Then Layla thanked her for her concern and suggested that the maid get back to business, and gave her the papers outlining their future plans, and they wondered where they should start. The most important of all these plans was that they needed to make personnel changes at Hilton. But Hilton is a pretty conservative place, and they might not have been able to do that. At the time, the maid didn't realize how she knew so much information. So much so that it was also extremely important confidential information. Then Layla thought that she should definitely not mention what she had read in the novel, because she had read the same novel a lot of times. She had memorized everything in great detail, and had also done some investigations for herself, and remembered little nuances that she could use in such situations. Then the maid asked what was required of her specifically, and Layla told her that she was interested in one very important thing. When in the course of her investigation she had learned about one man, she had been very surprised. He seemed very suspicious to her. She didn't know that he was connected to the Hilton family. "Viscount friend Blake, what is his connection with Dawson?" she asked the maid. She thought to herself, she was sure he'd been mentioned as Dawson's right-hand man. It just hadn't occurred to her. And really whether he was so marginalized in the family, she wondered. Whereupon she remarked that the man had even appeared at the Hilton party recently. The maid said she didn't recall him even coming up to say hello. Then Layla realized that apparently this maid would be able to bring her enough information, more than just how much she wanted to know, or so she thought, and she decided that the investigation showed that Doug was in good standing with Dawson. But for a prominent heir to the Hilton family, socializing with a nobleman from an obscure family for no reason seems unlikely, so they must be connected by some business. It occurred to her then that she wouldn't say what the nature of the deal theirs was, but she decided that she would try to use that information to her advantage. And then the maid complimented that she, Viscount Blake, is an important figure, and in fact, she only knows that he is known as a very polite and friendly man, and also he attends social events very often. Mentioned again that he had behaved very rudely at the recent party. He had also created a lot of awkwardness, and the maid said that it was not like him at all, and Layla had not misjudged the man. She thought about it and realized that it definitely had the Black family crest on it, and the face was the same as in the portrait, so it was hardly possible that it was a mistake. But she decided she should learn a lot more about the others, and she focused on Dawson and Doug's relationship, and they have only crumbs of information. Realized she was fixated on everything to do with him, as, from the moment she first saw him, he immediately seemed so familiar, as if she had known him for a very long time, and had clearly crossed paths with him somewhere, and was very curious as to what he was hiding. Jean decided to take it upon herself to find out what the relationship between Dawson and Doug was, saying that she could handle it, and Layla could count on her. She said she would sniff out absolutely every detail and gave the word bloodhound. By finding out what business connected Doug from Dawson, she would have been able to focus on comparing plans for the future. But it turned out the Signor knew nothing about their relationship. We need to get this all sorted out soon and leave her to Lasius, she thought. When Layla came home, the maid Jane said that the guy does not leave the room, and Layla immediately suspected him something and began to ask her what happened, also began to worry very much. The maid said there seemed to be nothing wrong, but Mr. Young hadn't eaten anything or left the room for a very long time, and then she thought she could bring him something sweet, and maybe then he would leave the room right away, or at least want a snack. She wondered if she was doing the right thing. She was trying too hard to get close to him because sooner or later she would leave him, and it would hurt him even more. Lady Marshmallow was the one who had mocked him. But why should she be the one to deal with the consequences, she wondered. However, the young master did not know that she had moved into her body, but to him she was still the same torturer. And yet, before Layla left, she wanted him to have very good memories of her. She then decided to go to his room, knocked, and asked if he was asleep. She went into his room and told him she had brought cookies and offered to eat them together. But when she realized he didn't even react to the sweets, she was very surprised. Then the guy started asking if she remembered the very day they went to the lake and something went wrong. He picked up on the fact that he didn't remember anything after he almost fell in the water. "How did that happen?" he asked Layla. Layla immediately remembered the doctor's words, who had said it was best not to tell him, update, and until he was fully recovered, as there would probably be some repercussions. Layla hoped to the end that the small gentleman wouldn't suspect anything and everything would be fine, but had to tell her that it was because he was then very surprised. The guy, on the other hand, said that since that day he has been feeling very strange and can't figure out what it is. Then he went on further with how he wanted to hurry up and eat the cookies his mother had brought, because they were so delicious, and Layla said they were his favorite with chocolate chips. The next day when Layla arrived at the Duke's estate, she, in order not to arrive late, purposely left earlier than the appointed time. But next time she would arrive even earlier. She was immediately greeted by the Duke's mother, too, and told her that she had ordered some dresses for her and they were ready, so she arrived just in time. She also said that she felt like she was applying her gifts a lot, so she asked her to prepare only one dress for now. Layla was very grateful to her. Layla was very surprised when she saw that very dress. She thought that was it, and her mother then interrupted her and told her that she had gotten it right. It was her new wedding dress. Layla immediately became very uncomfortable, as they only had a 1-year contract, but the dress was overly luxurious. Afterwards, she said that there was Layla passed and sat down, and besides this dress, she exemplified this today with a few more, and Layla immediately said that she had to stop, as she simply could not accept a few more gifts. Well, then the mother said that she had dreamed all her life of giving her daughter many dresses. Then she also said that she would really like to treat her like her own daughter, and Layla said she would like that just the same. And then the Duke came into the room. When he saw their two beautifully charming smiles, he said that he wanted very much to be smiled at in the same way. When he entered the room, her mother said that she had already asked him to spend time only with her daughter, and then the Duke told her that perhaps she would then give her son a little attention, to which the reply was received that she was not at all interested in such a thing. The Duke told her that she looked as if she was interested and very pleased with his coming, her face straight up all happy. With a wry face, she immediately told him to go to the doctor and get his eyes checked. He could use it at all. Watching all this, I didn't understand how families could talk to each other like that. But then I realized that it could have been much worse. Then he sat up to her and told her that he had been meaning to stop by here from the beginning, as he had some business to attend to. And he started asking Layla how she was feeling, if she was okay. Then Mother saw them together again and said that she was very glad that he had decided to marry. They looked very beautiful together. And she reminded him that he had been so stubborn in his unwillingness to marry that she didn't even know what to do. And now he had found a girl he wanted to spend his life with. And she's so pretty. Layla also thought about the fact that they'd have to break up after a year. And was that right? To cheat like that? I said so. At that moment, he was the luckiest man in the whole world, as he would be able to spend the rest of his life together with Layla. After which she also told him that if he was done already, let him leave, as there were quite a few more dresses to try on. Whether Honey was so embarrassed or not, she thought to herself that it was right. After all, they had gathered here to try on dresses, and it was too uncomfortable for that. Duke thought he could help Layla and asked her if she was tired, since she had too much on her plate lately. Perhaps she wanted to rest. Layla thought about the fact that she has absolutely no time to rest, as she needs to retrieve the mine taken over by the Hilton family, investigate Doug Blake, learn how to summon the ring for her sake, and also lately here seems confused because of forgotten memories. So it all needs to be dealt with, and she has absolutely no time to rest. Layla thought about it then, and decided to say that next time she would definitely find more time to try on dresses, as fitting takes more time and effort than it may seem. Then Mother told Layla not to worry, and she would take care of all the wedding preparations. She could rely on her. Then the Duke gave her his hand and motioned for her to go somewhere, then whispered in her ear that they would go to a place where no one would stop them from being alone together. They got into the carriage and started driving, and Layla asked where they were going. The Duke told her to try to guess, and he was sure it was a place she would appreciate. Layla's first thought was that it was a store that sold chocolate, and then Duke thought she wanted to go there so badly and asked her if she wanted to go there. Layla also said she thought they were going to a candy store, as she felt like the main character in a story about a king who loved chocolate too much. A long time ago, there lived a king who loved chocolate so much that he ordered to build a palace out of it. The palace turned out to be very beautiful, and the king was immensely happy, but the main characters missed one important detail. As soon as the sun rose high in the sky, the entire palace melted and the king died, buried by the melted chocolate. She told such a funny story to the Duke, and said that he loved chocolate so much that even his death from immersing himself in the sweet dreams seemed like happiness. And then she thought that the story of the foolish and greedy king was so like her, that even though she knew she would leave them in a year, she still had hope. Vasya was just trying to convince his mother of that. That's all. Then the Duke decided to confess something to Layla and said that the love of his life for the king was chocolate, but the love of his life for him was her. Then he said that to die in the arms of a loved one, he thinks he would be very happy too. Afterward, he took her hand and suggested that instead of a 1-year prenup, he proposed to her that instead of a 1-year prenup, she should play at a real wedding, and asked her how she felt about it. She was very shocked and didn't know what to do at that moment. She didn't believe that she really liked him. For her, it seemed that as soon as she stopped providing the necessary information, I would immediately lose all interest in her, and then she would be left all alone in a castle of melting chocolate. Then Hertz said so. She didn't need to answer at all, and he thought they were already there. Suggested she go and said he was sure she would really enjoy it. She also thought that she was very grateful to Lysias for the offer. However, she felt that right now she would suffocate like a king in chocolate. Apparently, she was too scared. When they arrived and got out of the carriage, she saw that it was an ordinary boutique and asked him why they had come here again. They could have bought everything they needed at the previous boutique. And then he said that she would guess everything. When they go inside, after that going inside, he ordered something to the owner to do. And surely there is some reason. It seems that the Duke and then she realized that she had prepared. He agreed to it. Then the seller brought a box with a very small shirt in it, a very beautiful shirt with a magic ring, and then she saw it and said it didn't look like a woman's shirt, and it was too small for Lysias. And then she realized that it was a shirt for Hera because their son should also take part in the wedding ceremony, and Layla hadn't even thought of an outfit for him. And Vasya is already doing a much better job as a guardian than she is. She thanked him for thinking of his costume and told him he would be immensely pleased and happy. To this Moose confessed that he had decided to take over some of the cares, as she was very busy with various little things. It was very pleasant for her, and she would have liked to see Hera in that outfit as soon as possible. And the Duke had then said that they should have a wedding as soon as possible to make it happen. Before leaving, the salesman told them to let him know if the size didn't fit, since he had to guess at random when he held Hera on his lap last time. And now he also said they needed to go somewhere else, the place he'd wanted to bring her to from the beginning. He said he was sending the entire outfit to Marshmallow Manor. When they arrived, Layla abruptly saw the very Doug Blake she was investigating to find out more about. Duke immediately realized that something had caught her attention, and Layla asked if he remembered the same man, Doug Blake. Duke said it was Blake, and he had not seen him at the reception hosted by Helen's family, and he said he was not familiar with him. But he immediately began to ask Layla why she was asking, and after all she had looked at him so intently last time. Was there really something serious going on with him? Layla told him not to say anything stupid, and the Duke immediately said that he was the only man who had caught her eye. After which she said that, anyway, they need to follow Baron Blake urgently anyway, and she can explain everything later. Duke immediately said he would definitely, and explained that this was the first time he'd ever been asked for something like this, but since it was also a wish, they would do it.